On today's show, it is part 2 of 2 with myself and Ben Ladner, good friend of the podcast, talking all things Hawks in the Eastern Conference here at the All-Star break. And without any further delay, part 1's available for you right now. This is part 2, and it's coming to you right now.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1658 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Wednesday evening into Thursday. And today's show is brought to you by the folks at LinkedIn Jobs. They help you to find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to, and they help you to do it faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. And of course, terms and conditions apply. Also, I want to encourage you, as I always do at the top of the podcast, to make us your first listen each and every day here at Locked On Hawks. Please subscribe to the show anywhere you get your podcasts: Apple, Spotify, YouTube, Amazon, all those places. And also, this is part 2 of 2 with myself and Ben Ladner. So if you missed part 1, I recommend at the highest level starting with part 1 and doing the entire conversation if you'd like to get the whole picture. And without any more delay, it's myself and Ben talking all things Hawks in the Eastern Conference. And here we go. One more thing on the Hawks before we move on. We talked about it a little bit earlier, I think, briefly, maybe offline, I can't remember. Jalen Johnson.
Yeah.
I talk about him a lot, but I'm in the weeds on this too. And around the league, I've been pleased with at least the basketball nerds. I'm thinking of Nikias Duncan, people like that, who are like, hey, Jalen Johnson. Like, people are talking about Jalen Johnson, and it's good because he's been excellent. So I want to know what you think of him. And he's a year 3 player that feels like a year 2 player because he just didn't play at all as a rookie. Mm-hmm. What do you make of what you've seen from him in doses this year?
I love Jalen Johnson. I think he is really good. I mean, obviously he's got a lot to put together to get to like the high end outcome for him. You know, he's still kind of scratching the surface. But as a third-year guy and essentially a second-year guy, like you said, I don't think he's a super strong candidate for most improved this year. But I think he'll be in the discussion. I think he should be in the discussion. Like, it's not just the statistical increment. I mean, his rebounds and scoring have like both either doubled or more. And he's maintaining, like, he's improved his efficiency, and the 3-point shot isn't like great, but as a 2-point finisher, a guy who can get out in transition, who can get to the rim either off the cut or off the dribble, he just like he gives them a physicality on the wing that they don't have anywhere on the wing, at the point of attack, in the front court. They don't have that kind of like fast, strong, explosive body on the team outside of him. He's like it's a little bit like, not to the same degree, but the role that Jonathan Kuminga kind of plays for Golden State. He just kind of, even though he's still young and he's not their best player, he may not be their second best player, but he's important because he just gives them an ingredient that they don't have anywhere else. And so from that standpoint, and obviously defensively, he gives them a kind of versatility. Again, the physicality, the range and the length and the size and all that. He just gives them an ingredient that they don't have anywhere else. And so, you know, he's not going to be a guy that I think you could, like you said, you can't just put him on the floor and be like, all right, go anchor a top 10 defense. He's not going to be like Draymond Green or Giannis or Evan Mobley in that sense, but he can be a very good kind of switchable 3-4 combo forward defender who does a lot of things for you. And then I think offensively, like he shows all these flashes that it's like, again, it reminds me of Kuminga a little bit, where it's like, if you can put this together consistently, he just has the tools to get downhill and to be efficient, and to kind of use his size and his explosiveness to his advantage.
Yeah, I like the defense, but I also, you might be surprised or not surprised to hear this, but lots of Hawks fans are acting like he's already the defender that he might be in the future. A very normal thing for young guys who've shown flashes. Yeah. And I think his tools, like you just laid out, his tools are great. And his flashes are awesome defensively. Mm-hmm. But he's it's not me being charitable, it's just the reality. He's just not played a lot of NBA basketball defensively. Yeah. And it's like, you can see that. If you watch closely, you can see his rawness. And that's okay. And also, he's been tasked, especially with Hunter's missed. He's back now, but he's missed a bunch of time this year. And that left Jalen as kind of the only defender on a lot of these big wings. And Quinn Snyder's been, to his credit, sure to point that out. Like, hey, he's having to guard LeBron one night and Star X the next night and all this. He has the number one assignment a lot, and that's been Hunter's job for a long time. And Jalen's not quite ready for it, but he had to take it on, and that is admirable. And I think that really probably his best long term, if I had to guess right now, is going to be that like number 2 defender that's like a havoc creator, really good rebounder, which is also something they really need, especially if they're going to build with the Kongwu long term. They need the rebounding, and Jalen's rebounding is excellent. Like he's already a strongly above average rebounder at the 4, and really that's probably underselling. I think he might be one of the better 4 rebounders in the league. That's not a center, but like he's got a 24% defensive rebound rate. That's excellent for a 4. Like he's flying around and all that stuff. So, and in the offense, like he's the only guy on the team. You talked about it, but he's really the only guy that physically can just get to the rim on this roster. Now they have guys that can break down. Trey can get where he wants to, but Trey's 6'1". DeJounte Murray is a great mid-range pull-up guy, not a great finisher around the rim at all. Hunter can kind of do it a little bit, but Jalen can get there, and I think they're trying to work with him to be a little bit more strong. Like it's funny, you can see the rawness when he tries these like craft layups. Mm-hmm. It's like, Jalen, you're 6'9", buddy. Like you don't have to do that. Just get to the line. I mean, they might foul you, but you don't need to do the soft like sweeping hook layup. Like don't do that. Just go finish. But I think you see sort of sides of that too. So I've made this point before, but like he's pretty obviously the brightest spot of the season so far.
Oh yeah,
Trey's the best player, and Trey's having a fine year. But as far as like if you're looking at 24 and 31, like okay, what is the number 1 brightest storyline? It's got to be Jalen Johnson by a wide margin. So
yeah, and he just pops in a way that no one else does on a team that's kind of can fall into these rote, sort of bland offensive possessions, and obviously isn't super dynamic defensively. He just kind of brings a dynamism that jumps off the screen when you're watching this team, because in a way that nothing else really does at times. When Trey has those nights, obviously he does, but he just kind of makes,
other than Trey.
he just sort of makes these plays where you're kind of like falling into the slow rhythm of a Hawks game, and then it's like, whoa, okay, there's Jalen Johnson.
He can do that, and yeah, I mean, there's kind of there's generally 3 ways the Hawks make highlights, maybe 4 if you want to throw in like Bogey going nuclear on one night, shooting crazy threes. But it's Trey's Treyness, mostly his passing and all that, and his long shoot. And then DeJounte, I will say, DeJounte Murray, if he's got it going in the mid-range and he's making everything, it is actually a lot of fun. Like It's more like, it's not really my speed necessarily, but he has these quarters or halves where he's like throwing it in the ocean. That's a lot of fun. And then there's Jalen Johnson, who can just like, especially his grab and goes. Like I would be remiss to not mention his end-to-end grab and go freight train downhill that he can do. And it gets like it's kind of sacrilegious to throw out the LeBron comparison, but that's the one area where I'm actually kind of okay with the LeBron comparison is when he does the grab and goes. Nobody's LeBron, but Jalen, especially in person, I recommend people checking out him getting a rebound and taking it all the way by himself for 92 feet and dunking with ferocity, and just the way he covers ground, all that stuff. It's not it's not quite Giannis, but it's one of those. It's kind of that 1B level.
He could be one of the best in the league at that.
He's a monster at it already. So and it's only going to get improved. Today's show is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for a small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role that you have available. And that's why you check out the folks at LinkedIn Jobs. They have the tools that you're looking for to help find the right professionals for your team. They do it faster and they do it for free. I've been on the hunt for hiring people a lot in my day job a few times before, and also even recently. And LinkedIn Jobs has been huge in making that process really easy and much more efficient. It saves time and effort along the entire way. They know that small businesses are often wearing a ton of different hats, and they might not have time or resources to find the perfect stuff that's needed to hire the right people. And LinkedIn Jobs are not just another job board. They have a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best possible place to find the folks that you're looking to hire. It gives you access to professionals that you can't find anywhere else, and they do it while making the process easy and intuitive. Hiring is easy when you have that many qualified candidates. It's so easy that 86% of businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours at LinkedIn Jobs, and they're also finding ways to make the process even easier for you. And 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring, and you can post your job for free by going to linkedin.com/lockedonnba. One more time, that is linkedin.com/lockedonnba. Terms and conditions apply. Let us talk some Eastern Conference before we get out of here. Maybe we'll end with the Hawks when it comes to the play-in, but I have a broad question for you. In the East,
I love broad questions.
Is it Boston and everybody else?
I'm starting to think so. Yeah.
I mean, the numbers tell you that it is. I mean, I won't go through all of them, but like this is just the raw NBA.com net rating, but at the break, the Boston has a plus 10.3 net rating, and the next team in the East is 5.8. That's a pretty big gap. And by the way, the team with 5.8 is the Cavs, and they just won 18 out of 20 games. They're playing great, but I'm not even sure that's even real for Cleveland.
Yeah.
We can talk about that too. But it feels like, especially with Philly kind of being the Embiid muck right now, the Bucks we'll definitely talk about being kind of a mess. I would say yes to the Boston and everybody else, but it's also, I also get it because Boston has done this before, and it's a little because you see Tatum and Brown and those jerseys, and you're reminded of all the tantalizing seasons. But also you could say this is a different team. They have Porzingis, they have Drew Holiday, Derek White's playing great, and just objectively speaking, their resume is clearly the best, not even close.
Yeah, I think certainly right now, when just watching the NBA night to night, who's the best team in the NBA now? Boston is clearly, at least in the East, Boston is the best team. I don't think there's any argument.
Agreed.
Qualitatively, at the current moment, it is Boston and everyone else. Like you said, maybe it's just the curse of too much playoff experience. Like we've seen Boston in the playoffs so much, therefore we've had more opportunities to see them fail. Because we've also seen some of these other teams fail in the postseason as well. In lower stages, they haven't even gotten where Boston has been. So maybe it's a little unfair to hold the playoff thing against Boston relative to these other teams. But I think right now it is. Philly would be the only other team, and I just don't know how Embiid is going to look when he comes back. I don't know how that. I don't doubt that they'll find the chemistry and the cohesion that they had before he got injured. But it all just comes down to when you have this one-star team like the Sixers do. You know, they might have the best player in the world. They certainly have the best player in the Eastern Conference, I think, at least when healthy. But if we don't know that he's going to be that in every playoff series, then that changes the Sixers a lot because they need him to be that against these best teams.
Yeah, I also don't even want to talk about Philly. I'm sure you get enough of Philly dealing with John on your podcast. Yeah. And also, it literally is unquantifiable. It's like I have to know what Embiid's going to look like. Yeah. Or if he's going to play. I mean, there's a chance he doesn't play. I mean, people have talked about that a little bit, but it's like, it really is like, people are just kind of assuming he's coming back. I mean, I guess he probably will come back, but even if he does, we've seen him beat it less than full strength. He's not the same player. I mean, it's happened in the playoffs multiple times. Like, he's still effective, but if he's dragging that knee around, and I think he's probably going to be dragging that knee around on some level, like they're not good enough, to your point. They're not good enough everywhere else. Max is having a great season. He's a breakout guy. That's a real thing. And yeah, they went out and get Buddy Hield. Buddy Hield's a good player, but the rest of that roster, we'll leave Maxey out of it. We'll say 3 through 12 is not that good. I mean, it's solid, but they need Embiid to be Embiid, and I don't think you can bank on that. Look, also they might be in the play-in by the time this happens. Like if he's out, they're probably going to be 6 at the absolute best because they're not very good. I mean, without take him away. Like, you've seen this, I know you've been following this. They've been really not good since he went out. Like, really bad. Like, they've gone into the tank, and I think they're probably better than they played so far without him. But
they've got a lot of other injuries right now.
Right. It's not just that. That's a good point. Like, Anthony Melton's been out for a long time.
Yeah, 3 out of their 5 starters right now are on the injured list, which is
their depth behind Embiid. It's been a topic for a long time now. Paul Reed I like Paul Reed, but Paul Reed being your sun, moon, and stars at center is not really going to do it for you, I don't think. So anyway, I almost want to throw them to the side. So let's put them to the side for now. Hopefully I want to see Embiid healthy. So hopefully that happens. And it'd be fascinating if they were suddenly the 7 seed and Embiid's healthy. That'd be wild. Yeah. Boston does not want Philly as the 8 seed. I can tell you that right now. They don't want that. I would say. Just because
I don't think
out of the available options, I guess maybe they actually, I'd love to know if they'd rather see Miami or Philly. In the first round, given all the history involved.
I think they would say Philly. I think if you gave them truth serum, they'd say Philly.
Oh man, I guess maybe. I'm one day I'll buy Miami. This is not that thing. I don't buy it. I still don't buy it. I don't buy it.
And sell Philly. I mean, that's the thing. Is like the Miami and Philly are doing the thing
honest,
that they both seem to always do. The Sixers have a great regular season. This is going to be the year, and then somehow they find a way to fumble it in the playoffs. And then the Heat, it's like, oh god, this is the year. It finally just comes apart, and they make the finals again. So we're on track for that again.
Right, and I've kind of been on the corner of not buying Miami for a long time. I was obviously very wrong last year in the playoffs. I was very right in the regular season and very wrong in the playoffs. I still don't really buy it. And part of that is just while we're here, I don't mean to challenge Jimmy Butler. I don't think he's the same guy that he was 2 years ago. We saw it even last year in the playoffs, and now they made the run anyway. But he had one series in him. He played great against Milwaukee, and then after that, he was pretty human. Like, he was not particularly good after that. And everybody else went nuclear. Caleb Martin, the best stretch of shooting by Gabe Vincent in his life. All that stuff. So anyway, maybe I'll be wrong about Miami, but we'll see. So quickly on Boston, I've always kind of not been a Porzingis guy, but he looks great. I think
he looks unbelievable. I couldn't believe he didn't make the All-Star team.
I mean, the only argument against him would have been he just hasn't played that many games. That would have been the only argument against him in making the All-Star team. Because I agree, like, he's been awesome this year. He's been the guy that people might have thought he was before, and he's not been. I think he is that guy now. At least he has been this year for Boston. He's been awesome. They still have Al, who is my age and still playing great. I don't know how he's doing it, but he's still doing it. And Drew is actually sneakily not been as good as he has been in Milwaukee, but also he doesn't have to be. The beauty of Boston is that he can just be Drew, and like he could just be like the fourth guy on offense. And the Derek White thing kind of went off the rails for a while. I love Derek White, but it was like, Derek White's a top 10 player in the league. It's like, no, he's not. Please stop. Don't do this. But anyway, my instinct is the same one as everybody else's, to be like, what are we sure about Boston? And then my brain is like, Boston's legit. Like, I do buy it as long as they're fully healthy. Now, the one thing about them, they can't really afford an injury. Like, they don't have the depth. They have decent, Peyton Pritchard's fine if you lose Derek White or Drew Holiday for a little while, but in a playoff series, do you want Peyton Pritchard playing 30 minutes a game? I don't think so. They're back, I like the Tillman move, though.
Yeah, me too.
For them. But anyway, I don't even know what I'm talking about. It's just, I think Boston is the perimeter favorite. I would say that. I think they are. The question is not who's the favorite. It's the question is Boston versus the field.
Yeah.
And I don't know which. I think if you guaranteed me Boston was healthy at the start of the playoffs and you said Boston in the field, I think I would take Boston, which scares me to death. But I think I would do that. I'm
with you. Every time I watch them, I'm just like, this is the best team in the East. Maybe the NBA. They look unbelievable. Their talent is what it is. Obviously, they fit like a glove. They have so many different lineup combinations that they can go to, and like all their pieces seem to be interchangeable. Their rotations, just they nail every fine point of the game on both ends of the floor. I think their ball movement looks really good. Their offensive system, principles, concepts, all that just are rock solid. The one thing I worry about with them is Tatum. Just because I
almost said that, because it's like, do they have the best player on the floor in a playoff series? And the answer is maybe not.
No, they don't. I don't even know if they have, like, could you argue that is there a chance that in the playoffs Jason Tatum is like the fourth or fifth best player in the East?
Oh yeah, I mean,
because so there's a chance that every series they play in the playoffs, he's not the best player.
There is a chance of that. I think that certainly against Milwaukee, he's not the best player.
Yep.
If
Embiid's healthy,
Philly is at full strength, he's not the best player. I do think
Miami would be the other one, just because we've seen Jimmy dial it up before.
Yeah, I don't know. That one's at least debatable, because I think Tatum is very clearly better for 82 games, and maybe Jimmy's still better in the playoffs. Jimmy has been better in the playoffs. I will say he's better than anyone New York has. Brunson's
Agreed.
capable of exploding like that, but I think Tatum's better than Brunson. And after that, I'm trying to look at the board. I mean, Cleveland, is he the best player in a Cleveland series?
I think he might not be the best offensive player in that series.
I don't think he is. I think Mitchell's better on offense than Tatum.
I agree. And this is my thing with Tatum, is just that I don't like, he's a great player, but not for the reasons that I think it seems like people think. We might have talked about this before, where
I'm sure
he's just not a great individual shot creator. Like, that's just not really his strength.
On the right night, if he makes all of his step backs, he looks great.
But that's what it takes. And the percentages say that that's not going to happen often enough for you to win a playoff series on the back of that. What he is great at is spot up shooting, cutting, attacking with an advantage, screening, moving the ball. Like, he's great at all of the quote unquote role player things on offense, which is not to say that he is a role player, but he's just I think in the playoffs, it's not that you necessarily need like a Durant level shot maker, but you just need someone who can be a shot creator. out of nothing. So whether that shot's for themselves or for a teammate, you just need someone that like you can give them the ball and 7-8 times out of 10 they can get you an open shot,
Right.
like a 40 to 50% shot. And I don't think Tatum's that guy. I don't think he's ever been that guy, and he keeps getting better. He gets better every year. So maybe this playoffs is the one where he finally puts that together. Watching him this season, I don't really see that. I still see some weakness as a rim finisher, where he's not always the craftiest or most versatile around the rim, especially against bigger rim protectors. I don't think he settles for as many difficult shots, but I also don't think he's significantly better at hitting those difficult shots.
Yeah.
The strength is still an issue to create separation. So they're just kind of these things that, like, when you stack him up against Embiid, Giannis, even like Donovan Mitchell, like those guys, I feel more confident in to just be able to create a shot for themselves or for someone else that's going to go in 40 to 55% of the time.
Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, and get buckets with your first bet now on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, if you're a new customer, get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 in your account if your bet wins. Bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and much more. And the FanDuel Sportsbook app is really easy to use. They have everything you're looking for across the sports betting space, from over-unders to money lines to player props, future bets, and much more. The app is safe, it's secure, and they cover the entire range of sports as well. That includes college basketball and the NBA, NFL, college football, MLB, golf, tennis, soccer, auto racing, boxing, MMA, and much more. And they have all the angles that you're looking for on the Hawks as well, including the full slate of offerings, point spreads, over-unders, money lines, futures, player props for the Hawks, and much more. And now is an awesome time to sign up with the folks at FanDuel Sportsbook, and the place to go is FanDuel.com/lockedon. One more time, that's FanDuel.com/lockedon, and shoot your shot with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Yeah, and I think that the argument, putting it sort of to the side, is that like maybe they're so good it doesn't matter.
Right.
You know what I mean? They have so many other guys.
He fits so well into that team concept.
He does. Too. So I want to make sure we at least say that, because like we both just said they're the best team in the East, and I believe that. And the argument is, like, especially now with Porzingis as another outlet, they have another guy who can get his own shot, and then you have Drew can do that a little bit. Derek White's not really a shot creator, but he can make shots. Brown can still create shots. So it's like they have enough. It's that forever thing, which I'm kind of predisposed to battling against it, but it's true that, like, you look at all the champions in history, like, they usually have a guy that does this stuff, and he's not that guy. I mean, last year in the playoffs, so they beat the Hawks in a series. Trey was the best offensive player in that series.
Yeah,
like, it was not even particularly close. It's just that Boston was so much better at everything else, which certainly that still would be the case now.
Right.
But you figure maybe in a series against somebody that's almost as good as them everywhere else, that difference can be what swings it, but maybe not. I don't want to say it's impossible, but as between it's that and just their general history, and I'm not sure I trust Missoula still.
We'll see.
I'm not saying I don't, but I'm not sure I do.
Right, I'm with you on that.
So that's another thing, and also just their shot profile has been better this year. And I am, this, but fans and listeners probably know this too, but I have no problem with them taking a lot of threes. Like, some people get mad at them for taking so many threes. That's not really a problem for me. My problem is when their offense bogs down, which we still see on occasion. Now, everybody's does, but again, that kind of goes back to the Tatum thing. It's like they don't have the one guy you just throw the ball to. They have to kind of get it in other different ways. And anyway, we like Boston, but
well, that's the question for them though. Is just like,
it is,
when the offense bogs down, is your ball movement and those like principle based things of your offense, are those strong enough to hold up against a really good defense? Because that's going to have to be the theory for them.
And they're number one in offense right now. It's funny because we're talking about their offense. They're number one in offense right now. Going into the break.
Yeah, and there's no question that in the regular season, and certainly the regular season to date, that's been the most effective. I mean, there's no questioning that. It's just a translation thing when it comes to regular season versus playoffs. And maybe they are. I mean, when I watch them play, I'm like, this is the best offense I've ever seen. Sometimes I'm like,
I agree. It's
the smoothest thing that I've ever seen on a basketball court. And so maybe it is good enough that, like, even a dialed-in playoff defense is not going to be able to do anything with that.
Well, this is sacrilege in these parts, but you could, if one wanted to, make a parallel between this Boston team and a certain 2014-15 Hawks team.
Yes,
Now,
come on.
now Boston has more talent than that Hawks team did. I'll be very clear about that. Boston has more talent. They do. Tatum is better than anybody that the Hawks had on that team. Very clear about that. But that is maybe a parallel you could draw. And that, by the way, that Hawks team was banged up in the playoffs. They were not their full self, but they didn't. That doesn't always work in the playoffs. That egalitarian, everybody gets to do their own thing. It's not as easy in the playoffs.
Yeah.
And the league's changed a lot since. That's why I'm not fully leaning into this take, because the league's very different now than it used to be. But I'm just thinking of, like, obviously this is a Hawks show, but that's a elite offense that we all knew was this beautiful game offense that didn't have the guy on it, and it didn't necessarily work when they ran into a team that had the guy on the other end. So
yeah,
I don't know.
Well, it's interesting. You mentioned the league. Well, no, but you mentioned the league changing, and I think about this a lot too, because the 2015 Hawks, the 2014 Spurs, and then eventually the 2016 Warriors kind of like elevated what those two teams were doing and took it to a new level. But going like those 14 Spurs and 15 Hawks teams, especially at the time, they were lauded, I think rightfully lauded, as like, oh my God, look at the way that they run offense. No one else is doing this. And now you watch the league and there are like 8 or 9 teams at least who look, I mean, if you just plotted the player movements in dots and watched it on a screen, you'd be like, oh, this is the 2014 Spurs. Like when I watched the Orlando Magic, the way they don't make shots, obviously, but the way that they move the ball, the way they play offense, I'm like, wow, this looks like
they don't make shots. That was a funny. I'm sorry, I didn't make you laugh. They don't make shots though. It doesn't actually matter.
But the process, the offensive process, it's not 20 years. I'm not going to go that far, but I'm like, no, this is pretty reminiscent of those. What at the time we thought of as progressive offenses, who were really like pushing the envelope with these. I guess I'll call them like European concepts, the kind of free flowing, like pace and space concepts. And now it's like everyone's doing that. Boston has just perfected it at a level that's higher than anyone else is doing right now.
Well, and that Spurs team, and we're off the rails here, which is fine. That Spurs team had the names, Duncan's still there, Parker Ginobili, but you could argue that was the last team that didn't have the guy. That won the championship. Now, Tim Duncan is an all-time great. I'm a huge Tim Duncan stan. Oh yeah. But that was age 37 Tim Duncan, who was not the same player.
Yeah.
So you could argue that was the most egalitarian team that's won the championship since then. I would say so. That was 10 years ago. Yeah. So like, that's a pathway, and they ran similar stuff. But they also had, that was a team where Boston has the experience in a lot of ways, especially with Brown and Tatum and Horford. They've not won it, and that Spurs team had winning experience already. That was their last championship, where they had already kind of done it. They had Pop, who Pop in 2024 isn't necessarily, I don't think, as dynamic as that guy was 10 years ago. But like, all that stuff, we'll see. That was a detour that
well, maybe it's like an every 10 years thing. You had the Spurs in 14, the Pistons in 04.
Pistons in 04, exactly.
I guess the 94 Rockets had Akeem, but you could argue they sort of played that like.
Yeah, the 04 Pistons are the ones that always get that. Because I think it's because Duncan was on the 14 team that they usually don't get brought. It's everybody always goes back to the last time that a team won the championship without a superstar, without a true star, was the Pistons in 04. When really it was the 14.
I think it was the Spurs. Yeah, certainly.
Now, but it's just that they had 3 Hall of Famers. But they were 3 Hall of Famers who the 1A Hall of Famer wasn't the same guy anymore. Right. Manu was already older too. And Parker was always kind of their, is a Hall of Famer, but he wasn't ever like a top 10 player in the league.
Anyway. At that point, he was kind of their de facto.
He was their guy.
One, could, like, if someone had to create out of isolation or pick and roll, it was him. But it was much more about the ball movement and
they had young Kawhi, a very very young Kawhi, Danny Green making every shot for weeks. Anyway, that was fun. We like basketball. Yeah. Okay. We've done nothing else on this podcast. Anyway.
So if I can add real quick, I actually do think we might be due for another one of these teams winning. Because the state of the league right now is such that the star talent, like the really high end talent, is arguably more evenly dispersed than it's been in a while, like decades. Maybe since like the mid 2000s.
There's no super team, that's for sure.
No super team. Each team kind of, and this is partly because of the financial realities of the league now and how that's changed. Partly, I think, because of the player movement, like the post 2019 aftershock that we're kind of still feeling. the league right now is relatively flat in terms of team quality and star distribution, which I think go hand in hand. So maybe we are in a place where like there isn't that team that has so much star talent. The Bucks, I think, would be the one team that might disprove this if they can ever get it together. But there may not be a team with so much top end talent that a team like Boston, who has just like not quite elite, but just like so many sub elite players, right? Like all-star to sub all-star level guys. Yeah. They have 6 or 7 of those guys, 5 or 6 of those guys. They have so much of that like low end, high end talent, if that makes sense. And they play in such a way that's so connected that they actually can overcome that absence of a true like high end offensive star.
Yeah, you could certainly, you could argue, I think reasonably, that Derek White is a top 50 player. I don't think you can get to the top 25, which is stuff that I was hearing before, but like he's a good, and then obviously Drew's up there, and then the other 3. So yeah, you could argue they have 5 of the top 50 players in the league. You could argue that, and it would be reasonable. And then you got Al Horford, who is kind of its own thing, but if he's your 6th best player, and he is, that's not a bad place to be, even at age 84, whatever Al is at this point. All right, rapid fire from here to get you out of here, Ben. Cleveland, Milwaukee, New York. Cleveland's 18-2 in the last 20. That's insane. Milwaukee, I don't know. And then New York was super hot when they were healthy. When OG came, they dominated for like almost a month. He got hurt, and they have a bunch of injuries. They've lost 4 in a row. And I candidly just don't trust the Knicks. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's part of what we're talking about with Boston, and they don't have the guy that I trust. But their defense is really good, and also Tibbs' playoff record's not great.
No.
So I say all that. Who do you like the most out of those 3 teams, playoff-wise? And who do you like the least out of those 3 teams, playoff-wise? Because they're kind of in a mix. Like, we all thought Milwaukee was going to be number 2 or number 3.
Yeah.
And they're not playing at that level, but they also have Giannis and Dame. And Doc's a proven coach. I don't know if it's proven in the way everybody loves, but He's
certainly been around for a while.
I do think Doc, I will say this, I do think Doc is an upgrade on Adrian Griffin. Does that mean anything? Maybe not, but I think Doc is better than Adrian Griffin, but time will tell.
Time will indeed tell. You could argue time has told in some senses with Doc Rivers already.
He won a championship.
He's a championship coach. That is true.
A long time ago. And I will say, I'm not a Doc guy necessarily. I think he might get it. Might be a little bit aggressive to be like, I've seen people be like, well, he's never done anything other than that 2018. That's not really true. Like I think he's not a bad coach.
I agree with that. Yeah.
I don't think that Doc is a playoff difference maker as a head coach. But I don't think he's a bozo either. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So I mean, he's won tons of NBA games.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's gotten to be this like caricature of Doc, especially, and I get it. The last couple of weeks, it's been his interviews, and the JJ Redick thing happened this week, and like, it's all very strange. But I think it's gotten to be like the caricature version of Doc, where he's like, now he's a bum, and it's like I don't think that's not true. I don't think. I just don't think that he's great either.
Yeah, he'll help stabilize the Bucks in all likelihood.
Sure. Well, he hasn't yet, but yeah.
Well, yeah, and the Bucks are, there's a lot going on there. I think of those 3 teams, boy.
I know. Same. I'll give you a second. I'm still gonna say Milwaukee.
I'm leaning that way.
Because it's don't like less about them. Yeah, agreed. It's less about them than it is about the other 2. And I think Cleveland's been awesome in this stretch. I just have to see them do it. They were so bad in that playoff series last year. Like it was that was a collapse. Like people, I think it's almost gotten underplayed how bad they were for a top 3-4 seed in the Eastern Conference to like truly no-show the way they did in that series against a pretty mediocre Knicks team. They got routed. And they're better than that, but like I don't know about Cleveland. I'm not saying they can't do it. I just don't necessarily buy it. And then, New York is just, can they score? I don't know if they can score at the highest levels. Maybe they can. And OG, that was a great move. And I will say, on the side of the Knicks, that first week post OG, maybe for 10 days, they looked incredible. They were terrifying. And if they guard like that, you know what it is, Ben? This is a Hawks podcast. I don't trust Julius Randle.
Neither do I.
At all. None. Zero.
Well, and my hope is that their roster, OG in particular, but some of their roster additions around the deadline will sort of like adjust the hierarchy and the ecosystem in a way where Julius Randle doesn't have to try to be the player that he's had to be the last few years.
Yes.
We'll see. You know, that's always more of a theoretical thing with some guys than others. I don't know how it's going to look for him, but his playoff track record is not great. I think predictably, like he just, the way he plays is not something that I on paper would say would translate to the playoffs very well, and it hasn't in his career so far. But maybe now he's in a more suitable role. That's kind of the hope. I don't know if that is the case because I still think they lack some offensive firepower. Like you were saying, I think their path is through defense, but they have a great defense and their personnel defensively.
They certainly could
awesome.
in the playoffs. Yeah, I mean,
and shooting, and they have, so it's if they, you know, they have the guys who can kind of pay off the open looks if they can create them. It's just unclear whether Jalen Brunson alone is enough to do that.
Yeah, I agree, and he's had a great year too. Brunson's been great. He's been better this year than I ever thought he would be. Got to be honest about that. The Randall thing. They're also like, this is very simplistic, but it feels like they are a team that goes to the old adage of like regular season team versus playoff team. Like, I think the way that they've built this with depth, defense, and a bunch of like super high role players is usually, I don't want to say always, usually a kind of a hallmark of a team that overachieves in the regular season and underachieves in the playoffs.
Yeah.
That's very simplistic, but it's just happened a lot of times before. So, and again, without the guy, because Jalen Brunson's been great this year. I don't think he's going to be able to carry them.
Right.
Maybe he will. There have been nights when he certainly has this year. And OG, I like to see more from them. I don't know if I buy it. So, long preamble. I think I'm going to just default to Milwaukee because I've just seen them do it, and I think that Dame's had a quietly not good season, and I think people have kind of forgotten that for whatever reason. And I think Hawks fans are on it because they are arguing, I think correctly, that Trey's been better than Dame this year. But I still kind of trust Dame to kind of figure it out. And hopefully Doc can like look at a spreadsheet and be like, hey, why don't we use Dame and Giannis together? You know what I mean? And then defensively, it's already been a little bit better since Doc took over. Offensively, it's not been better. But I can't imagine them being this bad on offense with Dame and Giannis. It just doesn't make sense to me at all.
I agree. And I think the flip side of the Dame conversation being quietly not great is that Giannis, I think, has been quietly, at least relatively quietly, amazing.
Yeah.
I think he's like, now that Embiid is injured, I think Giannis is in there for
Giannis,
MVP conversation.
Giannis should be, I do think that it's been a lot. I'm sure you've seen this too. The last week or so, 2 weeks or whatever, since the straw poll came out, the Bontemps, by the way, I'm a voter in that.
Nice.
It's been a lot of Jokic and Shea, and I think Giannis should be up there with them.
I agree. And I think Luka and Kawhi are nipping on his heels as well.
Yeah, no, it's pretty open. Like I still think that, you know, there's nothing wrong with voting for Jokic. Jokic has been the best player in the world for the last couple of years.
I still would.
I'm not against that. I just think that if you're gonna go beyond that, I think that Giannis should be right there.
Yep.
He's been very, very good. And the problem is that Bucks have been underachieving, so he won't get the attention. But it's not really been his fault.
Yeah. I think the Dame thing is the key for them. It's just they're gonna go as he goes. I think because he is the piece that, like, he's the guy that takes them from one superstar to two. If he can get to that level, and there's no one else in the East that can say that.
And he hasn't been. I mean, I know he had a great All-Star game. Who cares? But yeah, I think that the theory of adding Dame was that, you know, they're Milwaukee, and this is correct in some level, that Milwaukee's playoff offense, even when they won the championship, it bogged down a lot, and they got through it, but it was never what it could have been because Drew was overtasked as the primary initiator, and they didn't. And Dame is rightly, it's supposed to be a huge upgrade on that. And if you can kind of unlock that, and then get enough defense, because Dame's defense is pretty bad at this point. But they're betting on that, and I don't know if I believe it, but it would also be nice if this is more of a deep cut. It'd be cool if they got something from Pat Connaughton. What happened to Pat Connaughton? I've
been wondering that myself. He just doesn't look like the. I don't know what's going on. He doesn't.
I mean, the problem is they just need a wing that can kind of pretend to defend.
He's the guy that they need.
Right, and
to round out the Giannis, Middleton, Dame,
because Malik Beasley can't defend anyone, and he's their offensive guy, and he's a great shooter. If you want to go scorcher on offense, throw Beasley out there, and you're going to score. You should score. It's just that I don't think you can guard it. You can't play Dame and Beasley defensively. I don't think.
Yeah.
For any, I guess at least in real time. So between Crowder, who I don't think has it, or Connaughton, they need one more guy. They just haven't found that guy. And man, this is just for me to stay on brand. I would love to know if Milwaukee called DeLon Wright.
Yeah.
Because they signed Gallo before DeLon went to Miami, and DeLon would have been like a great guy for Milwaukee to get. And I wonder if that was like DeLon was like, hey, I'm going to Miami, or if they didn't even call him, because that would have been, they should have called him. If they didn't call him,
they picked up Pat Bev too. I wonder if they felt like that addressed the need. I mean, I would disagree with that, but
DeLon is much better than Pat Bev for what they actually need.
Right.
Pat Bev is a good instigator, but DeLon is bigger and can actually defend better than Bev can. Now, Bev was a better shooter,
right?
But I don't know if that matters next, because I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm also hopelessly in the tank for DeLon Wright, so there's that.
Right, yeah, as you've always been, and rightfully so, frankly.
Yeah.
The other thing with Cleveland, to hit on those other teams, Cleveland is interesting to me because you mentioned that 18-2 stretch, and a lot of that came with Evan Mobley and Darius Garland out. They were injured, and so they have a lot to figure out with how their four best players fit together, and I wonder, like, because part of their success is, such a big part of that was not only Donovan Mitchell and Jared Allen playing arguably their best basketball of the season or even of their careers. But it was like the stuff they were getting from their bench and from their role players, like Sam Merrill stepping into the shooting role, Craig Porter Jr. playing really well for them as kind of a sneaky, like cutting, screening, ball moving role player who can also shoot a little bit. Mm-hmm. They were getting a lot from those guys. And if you're playing your four best players together now, there's only room for one of those players that you are getting contributions from off the bench, which isn't a bad thing in itself. But I just wonder if, like, are Mitchell and Garland and Allen and Mobley so redundant with each other that you kind of run into some issues there where you want to get some different skills on the floor, but you don't really have enough lineup space to make it work, because you kind of want what Isaac Okoro brings you defensively. You kind of want what Sam Merrill brings you defensively, but you can only play five guys on the floor, obviously, at the same time. And
that's correct.
But you also, it seems crazy to like bench one of Garland or Mitchell or one of Allen or Mobley. It's just like, where do you go? They're kind of stuck in. I mean, it's not a terrible problem to have because they're all good players, but they are kind of boxed into this weird lineup.
And they don't.
Situation.
Yeah, they just don't fit. They're obviously their top four players. They just don't fit perfectly together, and it's okay. It's kind of how life works sometimes, but they're both overlap so much and what they do. I mean, and I think Mitchell, who I've always been a little lower than everybody else, it seems like, he was unlocked as the guy, like the clear point guard. When Garland was out, he started playing his best basketball of the year. And Mobley is kind of a center playing power forward, and Allen's been great. So it's like, I don't know offensively, I don't know if they can get where they got to get playing Mobley and Allen.
Yeah.
But you can't not play Mobley. It's not really enough.
Well, and then defensively, can you get where you need to go playing Garland and
Mitchell? Yeah. And also, do you get enough from Garland? If you let Mitchell cook the way he has been cooking for the last couple months, do you get enough from Garland? Because of his defensive limitations, if he's going to be just mostly an off-ball guy, like, he can shoot, he's still going to help you on offense, but like, is that enough? And I'm not sure. So
yeah, they're in a tricky spot. And then New York, like kind of the opposite. We're not as much high-end talent, but just incredible fit and
depth, fit, defense. Yeah. I don't trust Tibbs, but also I don't trust Cleveland's coaching situation either. I don't know. There isn't a Milwaukee. I was gonna say that's kind of the sneaky thing about this whole Eastern Conference playoff run. Other than Spo, who is coaching what I think is like the 8th best team in the conference right now, I don't love any of the coaching at the top of the East.
Yeah, you could say Nick Nurse if you.
He's done a good job, but like Philly is just such an unknown because of what we talked about before. Like, I think he's probably the best coach other than Spo at the top of that list, but. Is he going to have him beat? I don't know. So we'll see.
Rick Carlisle's been a good playoff coach, but
I just don't think Indiana's serious. Yeah, I just don't think that they're. They got Siakam to be better now, and they are better with him. But like, I think they're not quite there as far as like an actual.
No, I'm with you.
Threat to beat someone good. Maybe they could win a series if they got to play. It wouldn't stun me if Indiana got to like beat Cleveland or New York in a series. That wouldn't like blow me away. But they're not beating Boston. I don't think.
I agree.
Anyway, all right. Well, Ben, thank you for all this time.
Thank you.
We could go 2 hours. We always could, but we will sign off now. Anything else to plug? I know we should plug Read and React. a great podcast.
Yeah, just
You host with
listen to
John
the Read
Sauber.
and React podcast. Yeah, my John Sauber and myself talking about the NBA, sometimes insightfully, I hope. And that's about it.
I usually come on once a year before the draft. I'm ready to do that again if you want me to.
We're
That'll
ready
be
to
fun.
have you.
That'll be several months from now, but we're getting there. I had to turn in a mock draft the other day, and I was like, "Oh, it's February. I'm turning in a mock draft. This is a tough scene." And by the way, this class is not great. Anyway, Ben.
That's what I've heard.
Yeah, I'm sure you've watched a lot of these prospects so far.
You've been grinding the tape on these.
I don't believe you. Ben Ladner, everybody. Thank you for being here, as always. Please follow, Read, and React. Please subscribe to this podcast as well. Locked on Hawks, anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, etc. Check out Ben's work. Check out my work if you want to. And we'll see you all next time.